Hi, welcome everybody to today's lecture number 43, called Several Types of Lustful Eyes. This is such an important lecture because in order to advance in our inner work and start the process of creation, we must develop chastity. And the objective of this lecture is to identify some of the lustful defects that prevent us from reaching chastity. If we do not reach chastity, we are not even going to start the process of creating ourselves internally. So, let's start by explaining what chastity is. Chastity is exactly contrary to lust, the opposite of lust. Chastity is the wise use of our energy, while lust is the misuse of our energy. We need to understand the great value of our energy, especially our sexual creative energy, which we misuse and waste when we fornicate and expel it out of our bodies. We can see lust in every misuse of energy we do through different centers of our body: the mental, motor, emotional, instinctive, and of course the sexual center. This center receives the most quantity of energy to create, so this is the one that wastes the most. This energy has a great worth because with it we have the possibility to create ourselves, creating the existential bodies of the being through the practice of suprasex with our partner. This practice has as a base the triangle of love that is supported by chastity, fidelity, and love. Whenever a person goes to work in sex, they need to have this triangle perfectly balanced, since these three forces are acting from moment to moment. If the person forgets love, he will fail in the practice. We need to love our inner work and our partner selflessly and unconditionally. If a person forgets fidelity, he will fail too, because this work only can be done with one partner. And last but not least, if the person forgets chastity, he will also fail because he's not saving and appreciating his energy. Each one of these three forces will depend on the three primary forces. Chastity is directly related to the Holy Spirit, to sex, and to non-fornication. Fidelity is related to balance with the Son and with the justice, and love is related to the Father. All three forces have to come together in sex work. If sex is lack of any one of these three forces, it will be very difficult for us to progress. Better to say impossible. So, let's talk about fire. When we talk about fire, we are talking about energy, especially the sexual energy. Fire has two aspects: an aspect that is given by the Kundalini and another aspect that is given by the Kunda buffer. These two are total opposites. The word Kundalini refers to the fire raising up the spinal cord. The Kunda buffer is the fire descending to the atomic health of the humanoid. So, chastity leads us to save and give our energy a wise use, making it ascend, and lust leads us to feed this Kunda buffer, making our energy descend and feeding the ego or the defects. We already know that the sexual creative energy creates. Its function is to create. For example, with an ovule and a sperm, the species can reproduce. But you need to know that the other sperms that participate in copulation also are going to create. What? The psychological aggregates. And guess what? That's how men fall from heaven. When the seed was spilled, all the defects or psychological defects were created. That's why men were expelled from Eden. When we started fornicating in ancient times, expelling the energy out of our bodies through ejaculation and orgasm, this energy became involutionary. It got polluted, so the 7 virtues of the soul flipped down and became the 7 capital sins we know today. The heads of the legion, as we also may know them. And as we continue doing so, existence after existence, we continue creating more ego or defects and feeding them with our energy. That's how today we have millions of defects. Now, we need to know that there are three types of sexology. Okay? The suprasex, which leads us to regeneration, to the creation of the children of light, is the sex of the gods, is used to create or internally create ourselves. This is how everything that exists has been created, because every creation comes from that energy, the sexual. We also have the normal sex, used for the reproduction of the species. Is also a practice of suprasex, but here we are not going to create us internally, but a new creature. So we ask our Divine Mother to help us in that process, and she's going to select the best seed, one seed that is going to fertilize the egg. This is called the Immaculate Conception. So there's no need to fornicate and spill millions of sperms for conception. The third type is the infrasex. It leads us to degeneration, to the reproduction of the ego. It's the kind of sex that most of us practice just to satisfy our animal desires and lust without any transcendental purpose. So why should we reflect on the eyes of lust? First, to develop chastity, so there could be creation. Second, to purify our energy, because in order to make it ascend, it needs to have a certain level of purity. And third, to obtain potency in the sexual practice, because these defects of lust have trapped all our sexual potency and we are conditioned by them. When we start practicing suprasex, we may notice less potency because we are not longer feeding these lustful defects. We are not practicing infrasexualities. So these defects get frustrated and we may notice lower levels of potency and even not desiring to do the practice. But as we start eliminating them, we are going to free the fire and energy they have trapped, and we are going to recover the potency of the consciousness. So, how should we study the eyes of lust? The process of regeneration begins with the disintegration of the defects that we know that we have. And we do this through intimate self-reflection directed by the Divine Mother. We need to reflect on when and how we created that defect, how many times we have fornicated in that way, what are the damages this defect caused me, how this eye makes me waste and spill my energy, and so on, in order to judge ourselves, to understand that defect, and then ask our Divine Mother to eliminate any detail of this eye that we are observing and discovering. Now, let us look at some of the eyes of lust. There are millions, but we'll check a few so we can have an idea or a guide to start with. Well, lust manifests through these three aspects: the desire, the mind, and the ill will. First, we have desire to fornicate, then we justify that desire, and then we act. So we need to check this structure in order to identify it and see the details of lust manifesting there. Well, we have first the fornication, which is the spilling of energy out of the body, which we do through the orgasm and ejaculation. There is a wrong concept about this word. It is said it means having sex out of the marriage, but it really means spilling or taking the seed, the semen, out of the body. This happens when we masturbate through nocturnal emissions, known also as wet dreams, and through vaginal sex. So let's start by explaining about nocturnal emissions. Why do we have nocturnal emissions? First of all, because of the impressions that we receive through the five senses, and we do not eliminate at the moment what we see, hear, smell, taste, or touch. For example, if we see a person who seems attractive to us and we do not work on that impression and all the details that are manifesting at that moment, we will pass on to identification. Then we will desire that person, remember him or her, fantasize about him or her, and by not fulfilling that desire, it will become frustrated. And most likely, when we go to sleep, there will be a dream with a lustful scene with that person, and there comes the nocturnal emission. Some other details that we will find in this defect are lasciviousness, frustrated sexual desire, the eye that provoke itself, when we provoke another person, pornography, imagining, acting, speaking, executing, planning, feeling, wanting to carry out lustful acts, and so many others that we need to discover through self-observation. So, now let's talk about masturbation. There are two types of masturbation, the solitary and the collaborative. In the solitary, we will find defects such as self-homosexuality, pornography, use of sex toys, such as artificial vaginas or penises, vibrators, inflatable dolls, and other sex toys. In collaborative masturbation, we find details as the stimulation of another person, being masturbated by another person, or mutual masturbation, which can be manual or with sex toys. We find anal sex, sodomy, oral sex. We also find very perverse defects such as bestiality, necrophilia, and so on. Anything that is sex outside the vagina is masturbation, because sex is the union of the penis and the vagina. Everything else is masturbation. Through masturbation, there is a process of fantasy and mechanical imagination with sex scenes that creates and fits the incubus and succubus. These defects are the ones that participate in our wet dreams, provoking nocturnal emissions. Some of the consequences of masturbation are impotence, premature ejaculation, celibacy, and homosexuality. Homosexuality, because this defect leads us to touch a person of the same sex who is oneself, and celibacy, because this self wants us to be alone and not wanting to have a partner, so that we can continue masturbating ourselves, and this situation eliminates the possibility to create us internally. So now let's look at the vaginal sex. Here we find defects such as the reproductive self that has details such as the single eye, the conqueror, pregnancy, sex during pregnancy, marriage, lactation, mom eye, that eye, contraceptives, abortions, castrations, sexual degeneration, dissatisfaction, boredom, and so on. We have the defect of prostitution, in which we find pornographic trade, selling or buying sex, the pimp. There are various types of prostitution. We have residence, street, escorts, referrals, etc. Some details can be very subtle. For example, when we have a relationship or marry a person with any interest. That's a detail of prostitution. We have the defect of adultery, in which we will find infidelity towards the partner or adultery in the practice of suprasex, lovers, incest, swingers, the Don Juan eye, Casanova eye, love triangles, orgies, copulating several times a day, having sex while being sick, sexual abuse, forcing or self-forcing oneself to have sex, sadism, masochism, and many other perverse defects. And we also have witchcraft. This is when a person knows the power of sex and does it with a dark interest, using that energy, that sexual energy, to obtain material things such as power, money, beauty. There are also other details such as love spells, sexual mooring, revenge, jealousy, manipulation, having sex in states of anger and hatred, and so on. The previous defects we mentioned prevents us from reaching chastity, fidelity, and love. To the extent that we study those defects, we are going to understand the errors that we have committed, and we will perfect the practices of sex. We will also achieve greater sexual power, potency, since all these defects are part of the infrasex, and by eliminating them, we can reach normal and suprasexuality. In alchemy, this process is called whitening the brass. Also, take into account that if we really want to advance in our inner work and start making radical changes, we need to stop creating more ego. So we need to stop fornicating. Remember that the sexual energy creates. So the energy that is expelled turns involutionary and comes to create new defects and revive dead defects. Well, this has been the lecture for today. Thank you very much for being here. See you in the next lecture called the I treason. There we will learn how all our defects are structured through the treason, how to work on this defect and stop being traitors to our intimate Christ. Also, we learn a little about the cosmic drama Master Jesus carried out in order to show us the inner path. So thank you very much and bye-bye.